Hi, and welcome to the Catholic Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today, EMS Chief Doug Nominski.
Great to be back.
Yep, well, I know you're excited to be here. Not so much. But you know, if Doug's here, that we are going to talk ambulance concerns. Mm-hmm. And this week's segment, we are titling it Question and Answer with Scott and Doug. And the reason for that is, as many people know, we've been on a social media and media campaign to daylight the issues that we're having in the area with ambulance transport. And we have seen a number of questions on social media. The problem with social media is it's kind of a quick hit thing. It's here's information, but we can't get into a long dialogue. So we thought the best way to answer the questions that are out there is to answer them on the podcast with you and I, and then we can share the podcast out on social media and put it on our webpage. So those folks with these questions can actually go there and find out the answer.
Perfect.
So I think the first thing that we want to talk about, and we've had the question from the public, but it's also a response that AMR has given to our concerns with level zero being no ambulances available. And what they've said is level zero only lasts for a matter of minutes.
That can be true on some occasions. And then again, we'll show you some things here today that it can last a lot longer than that. So.
Yeah, we're going to start with some radio traffic because level zero has a far greater impact on the system as a whole than AMR is leading you to believe. So, Jonah, let's play the first clip. This is from June 30th.
June 30, 2021, 9:02:26 a.m.
Hi, it's Lindsay.
Hey, Lindsay, it's Ashley. Hi. Hey, 2101 is actually going to be closer to the Pine Tree Lane call.
Mm-hmm.
And we are putting 1101 on the Lakewood.
Okay.
And that will bring us to level zero.
Okay, perfect.
All right, thank you.
June 30, 2021, 9:05:53 a.m.
This is Lindsay.
Hey, Lindsay, it's Ashley.
Hi.
Hi. So that code 3 call on Doherty,
Okay.
1101 was reassigned off of code 2 traffic to take that.
Okay.
And then you have Lifeline 6101 going to Lakewood Drive.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
And we're level zero again.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
June 30, 2021, 9:19:32 a.m.
Alarm engine 75.
Engine 75, your Lifeline ambulance is 41 minutes out, 41.
June 30, 2021, 9:22:16 a.m.
I'm just advising AMR level zero.
June 30, 2021, 9:22:51 a.m.
I copy. Just let me know when they get a few more ambulances in the city.
Alarm copy.
June 30, 2021, 9:25:31 a.m.
62 copies. Can we dispatch rescue 2, please?
Affirmative.
June 30, 2021, 9:26:15 a.m.
Hello.
Hey, Scott, Lifeline. Hey, for 2530 Solar View Drive in Chino Valley,
Yeah.
we have 5101 en route from Williams, so they got about an hour ETA. Once our units start clearing, we'll switch them out, though.
An hour. Okay, let us know if it changes.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
June 30, 2021, 9:27:19 a.m.
Engine 75 Med 2, 918 Canterbury Lane, 918 Canterbury, Building 4. department 4314. No AMR available.
John, I think we can stop it there. So just by way of explanation, those phone calls were from AMR Dispatch to Prescott Regional Communications Center. This type of traffic goes on for an hour at least that morning. And I think the interesting, at least that's the radio traffic we got. There, It goes on much further than that with the level 0. But what I heard, Doug, was, hey, we've got an ambulance going to this call. Now we're going to take it off of that call, so that call is going to wait longer to go to this call. We're still at level 0. Now we've got an ambulance responding from Williams. They'll be there in an hour.
That's pretty common, as far as code 2 traffic versus code 3 traffic. They're going to move the priority traffic ambulance to take that instead of going to the code 2 one. So now that you're right, it leaves the code 2 person waiting for somebody to show up. And in this case, it was coming from Williams. That's a long way away.
Absolutely. And, so I think that what we can tell people from this is level 0 is a serious issue. That having no ambulances in the system creates a problem, and it creates a cascading effect of problems, as we'll hear in some of the other radio traffic we're going to listen to. But for the company, the corporate management, not the local manager, but corporate management, to say this only lasts for a matter of minutes and it's not really an issue, that's just not a true statement in any way.
I think that especially on bad days when the staffing levels are low, it's much worse, because when there's only a couple rigs in the system and now they are committed and they transport, you're talking sometimes an hour, maybe a little less, but anyway, you got to get to the hospital, transfer care, and then get back in service. That the calls are not stopping. We're still running calls in the meantime. So now we're just awaiting units to drop patients off, get available, get back into the system, versus when you have a lot of units in the system, it happens a lot faster. You get
right.
that unit that you're waiting for. So our guys aren't stuck on scene with a patient. We're providing treatment and
right.
asking alarm, where's our unit at? Well,
and the reality is that staffing is a significant challenge and has been since before COVID.
And continued.
For AMR,
yeah.
And it's only getting worse as we move forward. And quite honestly, not to get political, but the mandates that the federal government's trying to put out is only making will only make the situation worse. I don't know that AMR has a mandate at this time, but we're certainly seeing additional shortages at the hospital as a result of these mandates. So, in fact, the mandates are creating a health crisis that didn't exist before, worse than what we had. So it's stupid.
AMR is enforcing that mandate. I believe it's December. I don't know the exact date in December, but they potentially could lose a big majority of their employees to that, and that's going to just make this situation a lot worse. Right.
Well, and I'll just say this. There is some confusion on that, at least from my perspective, only because John Valentine's wife, he's the regional manager. She works for Lifeline Ambulance as well. She tends to comment on our social media posts, or at least put laughing emojis. But she said there is no mandate at AMR.
Good.
So I don't know where they're at, but the mandate issue is not their fault, other than my personal position is do not comply. They can't come after all of us. So, Jonah, let's go to the next clip, shall we?
June 30, 2021, 9:44, 41 a.m.
Dispatch, this is Shyla.
Hey, it's Scott at Lifeline. More changes for these calls. We took 4102 off their code 2 call and put them on the code 3 on 4780 Hornet Drive.
Okay, what's their ETA?
Let me see where they're at on my map real quick. Alright, so there's a whole mess going on, as you probably know.
Oh, yeah.
4102's ETA. Where are they? They're on my map. There's just huge clusters of units and calls everywhere on my map.
Well, that's okay. This is 4101 or 4102?
4102, because they were on a previous call of the code 2. They're coming from Wickenburg, so I want to say about an hour, unfortunately, for that one. And then the Mayor Rescue 21, that's on the State Route 69. Their ETA is about 30 minutes.
And the phone broke up a little bit. Which lifeline was that, 4101?
Wait,
Which lifeline, that last, you said
Oh,
something out from?
Lifeline 4102 is about an hour out. They're coming from Wickenburg, and they're on the Hornet Drive call.
Got it.
Okay, Mayor Rescue 21 is on the State Route 69 call. They're about 30 minutes out.
Okay, hold on one moment. Rescue 21, ETA 30 minutes. Okay, perfect.
And then Lifeline 4201 on the Canterbury Lane call is coming from Wickenburg as well, so they're about an hour out at this time. If the units start clearing hospital, we'll of course call you guys back and switch it up again.
Okay, perfect. I'll let them
That's
know.
what we got for now. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye.
So, Doug, one of the things I want to point out with these first two clips, and if you want to hear all the radio traffic that we captured for that hour time frame, I mean, there's a lot of traffic throughout the day, but for that hour time frame, is on our webpage, so you can go listen to it, so you don't think we just cut and pasted this stuff. These are actual calls that were taking place. This particular morning, I called the Bureau of EMS and said, we have a complete failure of the system in our area, and you need to do something. We need someone up here to assist. And their response to me was, oh, this sounds serious. Let me call you back. So they called back, and what they told me was their deputy chief, and I'm not going to use his name at the Bureau, but he seems to be at the heart of a lot of the issues within the Bureau. Deputy chief had reached out to AMR management, and AMR management told him there were 11 units in the system and that there were no delays in our area. I think this radio traffic debunks that. There were definitely delays and failures of the system. And then they went so far as to tell me, well, Prescott hasn't called to complain, so it must not be as bad as what you're saying.
The radio traffic speaks for itself. That's what I would say to anybody that wants to hear it. So
yeah, I think DHS would do well to listen and take action when people call, rather than rely solely on self-reporting for what's happening in the area, because that creates a problem, and I don't think that makes them look good. So, Jonah, one more clip, and then we'll go to some of the other questions that we have.
September 11, 2021, 20:38:02.
It's so funny.
Hi, Bonnie, Lifeline. Hey, regarding the code on Glassford Hill, we have no units available. Same with Winding, Oakwood, and Gil Gardner. No units available.
Hold on one second.
Level 0.
So it is going to be Gale Gardner, Oakwood, Glassford, and Winding?
Affirmative. Those 4 calls holding. Level 0. No units available.
Okay, thank you.
September 11, 2021, 20:38:19.
June 50 alarm.
Mississippi.
AMR level 0. For your call, no unit.
Copy that. If you can dispatch the closest CAFMA rescue.
So, Doug, that was September 11th, the evening. I had driven up that Saturday night to speak at the Healing Fields, and I was listening to radio traffic as I drove into town, and then as I was leaving, and we had our producer with us who's producing some videos for us, and he said, what the heck is going on? And I called the battalion chief and asked him the same thing. So for people who might be listening to this or watching this on YouTube, when they say that there were no ambulance available for the code on Glassford, that means someone was in cardiac arrest. That was what the call was for. So we had an engine and a battalion chief dispatched to a cardiac arrest on Glassford Hill, for which AMR was at level 0 with 4 calls stacked up, no ambulances available. So they requested the closest rescue from our agency to respond within our jurisdictional boundaries.
And it's a good thing we do have those rescues, because those are the situations where we deploy those and they save the day, you know.
And those were, if we look back at the complaints we talked about before, that's why we are doing this, folks, because of these types of situations. We can't operate like that. And I'll just remind everyone that we have complained to the state about untoward outcomes, patients who have died on the scene because we couldn't, in our opinion, couldn't get ambulance transport. And the state's response back was those people were going to die anyways. I would push back on that and say, if we ceased CPR on scene because we were there for 45 minutes without ambulance transport, that's a direct result of that injury to that person is a direct result of not being able to transport to the hospital.
Not only that, but I mean, on any code, we're going to work a code on scene until we get return of circulation. Say we got it. Say we had ROSC within 5 minutes. Where's the ambulance? We can't move them until we have that there. So it kind of doesn't really matter whether or not they would have died on scene or not. Had we gotten ROSC, we still wouldn't have had the ability to get anybody to the hospital.
And that's a problem. Yeah. And so downplaying these things at the state level, I think, should be concerning to our residents, because this is a direct result. I mean, if we drill down to the root of the problem that we have, it is the state of Arizona Department of Health Services, specifically the Bureau of EMS, ignoring these issues. And we're trying to get the attention of the governor to get something done. So, Jonah, let's go to one of the other questions that we have so we can try to move this along. So question number 1 is, CAFMA considered entering into an agreement with AMR / Lifeline Ambulance? Well, let's address that question directly. We have tried to work with AMR for the 8 years that I've been here. And we sit down and have meetings with them. We express our concerns. At one point, we had offered to look at the concept of co-staffing and what that might look like. And then they leave the room, and we try to follow up, and we were getting zero follow-up from them. In my personal opinion, based on my view of the way things have been, they really didn't want to talk to us in earnest about moving something along, working together, until Priority was signaling they were going to come up here and drop an application. I know they disagree with that point. I'm just saying that's the way I see it.
I think that we both were finding things in those talks, whether it's something on their end or our end, nothing quite would work out where, we would come to something that we both agreed upon. I know for me, it was having to do with like charting, like they wanted to use their charts and we didn't. We want to use our charts, and their billing relies on their charts. So, I mean, there's always something. It just made it tough to come to at least a co-staffing model agreement,
Well, and we have some disagreements with some of their billing practices as well that we thought might jeopardize the position of our agency, so we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. I think the second part of that, and what people need to understand, is we try to look globally at things, right? The way we approach them. And when we look across the United States at places where people have signed agreements with AMR, the fact of the matter is that AMR, from what we've seen and what we've heard, especially down in the valley, but from across the country, is that AMR will sign a contract with you, but they're not actually going to abide by it. And what we see in the valley now is that they've lost a majority of the contracts for failure to perform. Mm-hmm. And the answer to those councils or districts from AMR, when they say, look, there's a failure to perform, we're going to go with a different company, is no, we're not. We're doing fine. There's no issues with our response and no issues with our response times. We do a great job. Pat us on the back. So why would we sign an agreement with a company that has a history of not abiding by their agreements? In fact, in one case, they walked away from over $1 million owed to the city of Scottsdale. There was an out-of-court settlement that's all private, so I don't know what that was. But it's just not a company that when I look at them, I say, oh, yeah, let's sign the agreement, because they do such a good job honoring what they write down on paper.
Unfortunately, it's the only company we have to work with right here. So our hands are tied. It's like, currently, what else can we do than to try to come up with a situation that works? And for us, we're looking at turning in an application for our own CON.
Approved by the board Monday night. Mm-hmm. Will be dropped this week. We just got this hot off the presses, and we'll be reviewing it after we finish recording. It's Wednesday, so by the time this comes out, it should be dropped.
And this isn't going to solve our problems, but it hopefully will help.
And we're not trying to push AMR out. We're trying to supplement the system. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of what does the agreement really do for us. Prescott ratified an agreement, and they were transferring patients or transporting patients in their patient's personal vehicle right after they ratified the agreement. So signing an agreement with Lifeline AMR does not magically make additional resources appear. we still have the same problems. And that's why we think it's important for that second private company who's going through hearing right now to have their CON and be able to operate in this area.
And we have no clue whether they're going to get that CON or not.
We do not.
Hopefully our application is successful, and at least we can contribute what we can to the system.
Right. Okay, question 2. Is it possible for CAFMA to have ambulances that work in conjunction with AMR Lifeline ambulances? We are looking to have ambulances that work in direct relation to any company that's up here, whether Priority gets their CON and comes up, or they don't and it's just AMR. My view of this, Doug, and tell me what you think as the EMS chief, is that we need to be on similar CAD so that the CAD can choose the closest appropriate unit for the call that goes out. And we want to make sure we have backup agreements signed with the other CON holders around us for that very thing. And that would be, at this point, it would only be AMR, and it would be Marifire as well. And we heard Marifire, you're talking 30, 40 minutes away. So we'd certainly want to have those backup agreements in place to support each other. But I still think there needs to be more resources.
It wouldn't hurt. Mayors responding here to our jurisdiction quite often, just because they have backup agreement with AMR.
Right.
We would have those same agreements, and we would, honor that as well. If they needed a unit from us to go to Prescott, we would be able to provide that, as long as it wasn't running another, call. Absolutely.
That's the idea, is to work in partnership. So question number 3, Jonah. Are there currently AMR Lifeline ambulances stationed in each of the Quad Cities? The answer is yes, and the answer is no. Maybe. So in their typical design of their model, then they would have ambulances in each of those areas. But due to the staffing issues and not being able to put up enough units, typically no. They're not stationed there.
They're moving around. They go, wherever the calls are happening, they shift those people wherever the call. It's system status management,
right?
Which that's industry standard. I get it, but they're also doing interfacility transports, which takes away some units out of the system and sends them to Phoenix. Now you lose 2 more, you're down to 5, 4, 3, whatever it is.
Where I came from, St. Charles County Ambulance District, so it was a tax-supported county-wide ambulance agency. They run a model that, because they do all interfacility as well as 911, but their model is, here's our interfacility division. These ambulances, based on our data, are solely for the transferring of interfacility patients, and here's our 911 system. Now, if we get an emergency transfer that we don't have an interfacility unit for, we'll use an emergency unit. And if we have an emergency call that we have that an interfacility unit is closer to, we'll use it. But typically, and that's a good model. I mean, if you deployed that type of model up here, then you would have units that would be for interfacility transport, but these are dedicated 911. The problem for a private for-profit company is, how many units can you put up here and still generate the profit that you need to show to your investors? Because they are a publicly traded company. I believe their return on to their investors, the most recent one was around 31%. Pretty significant.
Yeah.
So next question, please.
Just to be clear, too, for what we're putting in for is 911 calls only.
Yes.
We want nothing to do with interfacility transports or taking that revenue away from the privates.
Correct. And let's make this point with that, Doug, that an interfacility transport is pre-approved, hospital to hospital, nursing home to hospital, hospital back to nursing home. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that you're transferring a patient interfacility from YRMC down to a Phoenix hospital, and that the bill for that is $4,500. Well, because that's pre-approved through the insurance company, they will get the $4,500. Medicare has a cap, but they'll get up to that cap. On a 911 call, you're looking about a 50-cent return on every dollar that you charge. So if your trip charge is $1,800, you're likely to get about 900 of it. So we are not trying to get into, when somebody says this is public versus private, we're not trying to take that interfacility traffic away and generate revenue for our agency. That's not it at all. We are trying to support the 911 system that doesn't generate the large profit numbers you see on the interfacility side. But you can't break even with it. So are ambulances unable to respond to emergencies because they're tied up with non-emergency calls due to public misuse of 911. This is my take on it, Doug, because I've worked in a large system in the city of St. Louis. I worked in St. Charles County, and now I've worked here in a more rural area than I had been before. And I can tell you in large cities like St. Louis or LA or Phoenix, there is significant misuse of the 911 system, to include people calling and having their suitcases on the front porch because really they just want to get downtown. I just don't see that as much in our area. I mean, I'm not saying there's zero abuse here because that's not a true statement, but I don't think abuse of the system is creating a problem up here.
I don't either. I think that probably that question is more referring to is just Code 2 traffic, which is non-emergent traffic. You know, lots of things come out that way. It's determined through our dispatch. They ask certain questions. They're trying to figure out what's going on with this patient rather quickly and how to dispatch our units. And if it's a non-emergent response, sometimes they are pretty benign things that we're seeing people for, but we don't know that until we get there and assess them. And yes, we do dispatch an ambulance to those calls because we don't know what we got until we see them.
Right.
You know?
Well, in an emergency medical dispatch system, an EMD system, the typical model is that for an Alpha and Bravo, so Alpha is a non-emergency response, low priority call, an ambulance alone goes non-emergent. If it's a Bravo call, it's a code call, so you're running lights and sirens, but it's an ambulance only response. The fire engine goes on your Charlie Delta Echo calls. Those would be your significant injury, traumatic events, cardiac arrest, things like that.
And our current dispatch structure is not set up to do that. I think we're working towards it, but
we are. The difference is, and what AMR has proposed to us is, they want to do it backwards, where we go to the call and we only call them if we know it's a transport. The problem that I have with that is we're taking our large engines and engine companies and sending them on these calls that maybe we shouldn't even be the ones running on it. If you want to have the transport service in the area, then run the transport service.
Maybe if we did have rescues or actual CON ambulances, we could consider a different model, you know?
Oh, absolutely we would. Absolutely we would. But in my opinion, based on the models that I've seen, what they're asking for is for taxpayers to subsidize a for-profit company, and that I disagree with. That's my opinion of it. So next up, question 5, is CAFMA allowed to transport a critical patient in a fire engine? The answer to that, quite simply, is yes. Here's the difficulty with that. The engine is not the best place to transport somebody.
Or safest for that matter.
No, it's not the safest. If you have a cardiac arrest patient, you can't work a cardiac arrest patient in the back of an engine. And that's why we have the rescues today. We have those because we've transported in engines, we've transported in private vehicles. That was not the best thing for the patients. It was not the best thing for our crews. So we have the rescues that can respond in. But understand, we don't have 4 rescues that are staffed with two people per rescue. We occasionally have 2 of them staffed with 1 person each. Otherwise, our 3-person engine goes down to a 2-person engine with the rescue in tow behind them.
Yeah, we make the best of the situation with what we have, which is, you know, moving people around. And it works, but it's definitely not ideal.
And we do not currently bill under statute. We can't bill at this time, but we can transport when necessary. And we do have a protocol from our medical control physician at YRMC, the doctor who oversees our operations, that tells us when we should transport, including non-critical patients.
And that went all the way through the hospital's legal system too. So
it did.
We're good.
All right, next question. How will CAFMA pay for their ambulances? Will we charge for ambulance transport services? So let's answer the second question first. Under statute, if we're running an ambulance, we have to charge. We have to bill. So how will we pay for the ambulances? Well, we have to bill. That bill will generate some level of revenue, and that will ultimately, after 18 to 36 months, we will be covering the cost operating in the black for those units. If we look at the other models around the state where the fire services has taken on the responsibility for CONs, they've seen a return on investment in about 18 months. So
that would be ideal.
And really, pardon me, I'm a little bit of an allergy there. when we talk about the $30,000 deficit, quote unquote, that we're projected to see in the first year, that $30,000 is easily explained. For example, right now, I'm being paid as the fire chief. Mm-hmm. If we have ambulances, I'm not being paid anymore as the fire chief. I'm still being paid. But we have to apportion part of my salary to the ambulance, and then that goes on to the ambulance cost recovery reporting form. Your salary, Jonah's salary. Throughout the organization, our dispatch costs that we pay today, they're not going to increase, but we have to start assigning some of that over to the ambulance side because of the way the state wants it accounted for. That's where you're starting to see that $30,000 deficit. And the reality is I don't think that's there when we start really drilling down to the numbers. It's just the way that we have to report it.
And it's also, we're starting a new thing that we don't have ambulances right now. We would have to buy ambulances. We would have to hire people, buy new equipment. I mean, there's costs associated with this.
Yeah, any startup, there's a cost. But we believe, and he's not an economist, but the consultant who did the financial analysis for us says, within 18 to 36 months, you'll be in the black. You'll see a return on that investment. So I think it's a good investment based on the problems we're having. Question 7. Will CAFMA require that paramedics and EMTs become firefighters? The answer to that is no. And the reason for that is quite simply it's PSPRS. If we had firefighter, EMTs, and paramedics, the cost would go up potentially close to $1.5 million a year for running the ambulances. That's where we would see a deficit in long-term financial impact. So no, they will not be required to be firefighters, paramedics. As a matter of fact, we're hiring civilian paramedics and EMTs specifically to avoid those additional retirement costs.
I do see, those folks, those civilian employees, we would probably see some of those people want to become firefighters and test and go that route. But it would be a great way for both of us to get to know each other and kind of a pipeline in. And
what they would do at that point would be move off the ambulance and go into an engine. Exactly. So basically there'd have to be an opening on an engine to apply, and a hiring process to move from the ambulance division to the fire operations side of things, even though we're working very closely together. So, but they will be civilian paramedic EMTs. They will be in state retirement. It's just the ASRS and not the PSPRS system.
Yep.
Okay. Next question. How does the state regulate ambulance transport response times?
CONs.
That's a good question. Certificate of Necessity, 1999 Arizona Auditor General's report. You can find it on our webpage. Says this system is broken and does not consider the patient in any way. And it does not promote free market competition, as we see currently, because right now, Priority is going through a hearing to obtain their CON. What I find concerning is that the deputy chief of the Bureau and his team, when Priority submitted their CON application, they said, we'll charge the same rate as what AMR charges, and we will charge the same mileage, but we're only going to charge what we pay for supplies. And they slashed that, they being the deputy chief of the state and his team, slashed that number by over $350 below what AMR charges, and told them they couldn't have as many resources in the system. If that sticks, then it's not financially feasible for Priority to operate up here. Now, I'm just going to throw this overhead question out there, Doug. Why would the state knowingly cut a transport rate to the point where another company couldn't operate in the area?
I would love to see the paperwork behind that decision-making process and say, just show me on paper, show me the numbers, how this makes sense. Because I know in our application, we're going to be charging what AMR used to charge before their upcharge went into
$75 effect. Less, and we're charging only what it costs for supplies. But so when we talk about state regulation, it's a significant challenge. So the way that you report to the state, and I want you to think, and if you don't know the story, go back and look up Boeing 737 MAX and the federal investigation into that, where Boeing self-reported and self-tested, and well, it didn't work out so well for the federal government setting up that system. But that's exactly the way the CON works in the state of Arizona. The ambulance provider simply reports to the state, here's how good we did this year, please give us a gold star. And the state, for their part, doesn't automatically audit anything, and very seldom, even when there's concerns, actually audits what's turned in by the private companies.
And it's not just the private companies. Anybody with a CON, that's the way it's done. Like you turn them in, you self-report.
Right.
They can do it third party if there's a reason to. The state can ask somebody else to look at them. They can look at them, but generally speaking, it won't happen unless there's a reason to do so.
Well, and here's the thing: the difference between a public and private company is the public, not company, but public, us. If we have a CON, everything we do is public record.
Mm-hmm.
So we report response time analysis every month to the board, and we put it on our website, and it's in our board packets, and our Prescott Regional Communications Center tracks all of that, and we track it in-house. It's all public information. Anyone can check and see what we're doing. We're very transparent that way. I cannot say the same thing for a particular company who is not as transparent. And I think we've got some exhibits we can go to illustrate some of our concerns.
1050 alarm.
Take it to ETA on Lifeline, please.
Engine 50, they're showing on scene. They should be there any minute, but I will double check with their dispatch.
I copy, thanks.
Engine 50 alarm.
Alarm, Engine 50.
Engine 50, did Lifeline make it to the scene? Their dispatch is showing the same.
They're not here yet, but I've seen all the look for them.
Copy.
Alarm, Engine 50.
Engine 50.
They are not on scene.
Engine 50, can you please repeat your traffic?
Alarm, Engine 50, Lifeline is not on scene.
Copy.
So, Doug, that was on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the next slide. And this was a screenshot taken by one of our battalion chiefs. Was that today?
It was either yesterday or the day before.
So what he saw on the screen was that a Lifeline unit was showing on the scene of the call when, in fact, they were not on the scene of a call. And we know from Prescott Regional Communications that months ago they had a conversation with AMR leadership, corporate, because they were seeing Lifeline units being shown on the scene of a call in advance of their arrival, sometimes 5 to 8 minutes before they arrived.
I spoke with the leadership from AMR. They don't have MDTs in all of their units yet, and their impression was that their dispatchers are hitting on scene for whatever reason, whether it's maybe they thought they heard somebody say that. I don't know. We've asked them to look into it and to please make sure that their units are accurately stamping on scene times, because that's important to us, obviously. And
right.
We want to make sure people aren't incorrectly or doing this on a malicious basis.
Well, and I think the concern that I have is that this has been going on. We see it. We capture it in screenshots. We have radio traffic of it. And yet the state, for their part, doesn't look into it. So when I talk about the Boeing 737 MAX and the debacle with that, you have a private company that reports their response times, whatever they want them to be, with no checks and balances. And I think there are some legitimate questions that should be asked, number one, about that process. Mm-hmm. And two, somebody should look and see if these numbers are accurate, because I don't believe they are. And when we talked to the state a couple of years ago, Doug, we took all the data that you had, mm-hmm. and then there was a slide that the state put up when we were down there with all of our elected officials, and they said, well, here's the data CAFMA submitted, here's the data that AMR submitted. You can see there's significant differences here. Next slide. completely dismissive.
That's kind of highlights the importance of standardizing those definitions on how you report response times and like exactly what. So we're all playing off the same sheet of music, and I know you're involved in that process as well.
Yeah, and we are, and I think on scene is pretty standard. On an emergency scene, interfacility, there's some argument there, but on scene means you're there, actually there, not still driving there. And there was some question at one point about, well, is AMR measuring their response time from the time the call actually came into their dispatch center, or when they finally gave it to an ambulance to respond to the call? And did they change that response time based off of, hey, we started a unit from Wickenburg, which is an hour out, so that starts the clock. But then when we changed it to a closer unit that was 10 minutes out, 20 minutes into the call, did they call it a 10-minute response time now because they gave it to this AMBO and they gave them a 10-minute response time when, in fact, the call came in and was dispatched here?
I've been
clock
told
starts
that
there.
They do. That's exactly the way it's done. Like from the first initial one till the first whichever ambulance gets on scene, that's how they're calculating it. That's what I've been told without sitting down and looking through their data, which we have no access to. You know, how would I know?
It's just a question, because when you say that they would, not you, but when they say that they are meeting their response time criteria 98% of the time, and we listen to the radio traffic and we see what's happening on the streets, I don't see how you can honestly say that that's happening.
It just highlights the need for us as an organization to sit down and with your plan to do an RFP where we can actually, at that point, stipulate we would like to see these response times in these zones. Like this is what you should be making. Something reasonable, and they're going to have to adhere to those, or we'll have some sort of, repercussions, whatever those be.
And the state is looking at some more standardized response times, some better standardized response times that better reflect national standards. I'm on that rules committee. It's kind of a cluster at the moment. We'll see what comes of that. Okay, next slide, Jonah. I think we made the point on that one. Not a lot of oversight. Is level 0 a scare tactic so that CAFMA can take over ambulance transport? I think we beat this one up when we started.
I think so too.
It's not a scare tactic. We don't employ scare tactics. We're not gaining anything from this other than we have tried everything we could for 6 years to address the response times issues in our area that we've seen, because patient care is priority one for us. And in that time, the state of Arizona has sat on their hands and ignored us. And unless the public stands up and says enough is enough, this has to change, nothing will change.
And the public just, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
You're finally being exposed to some things. Obviously every one of us here, even AMR, we want to make the situation better. But for some reason, they just can't, staff enough units, whether that's, ability to hire, whatever.
Well, AMR employees want to make the system better.
Exactly.
AMR corporate.
And I'm sure, we talk to their employees on scenes. We're all in the same boat together. We all want to do the right thing.
Right.
Here at CAFMA, we feel that, we're doing the right thing when we run a rescue, and we want to get a CON so that we could do this the right way,
Exactly. And not push anybody out, supplement the system. And we do believe that there's room for additional competition with another private company. And I think there's plenty of room for 3 CONs to operate up here, especially since we're not trying to saturate the system.
No, I don't think 2 ambulances is going to dent anybody's profit margin.
No, but it is going to supplement, and that would help us tremendously. Okay, Jonah, I think question 10 is that's it, the last question. So for more information, you can visit cacfire.org. Right below the picture on the top of the page is a blue button that will take you directly to information regarding the ambulance shortages and what we're trying to do to fix it. Is the situation scary? Yes, it is. I'm sorry. It just is. Is this a scare tactic? No. Sometimes the truth and the facts of the situation are just scary. They are what they are. We need you, if this is concerning to you, we need you to reach out, talk to your elected officials. The legislature said they haven't had the appetite to deal with this, or they don't have. Our LD1 reps, let me just give a shout out to LD1 rep Quan, who's sponsoring legislation for us this next time around. but he needs to be able to tell his fellow legislators that this is a serious problem. And that's why if you reach out to him, just say, look, we support your efforts to get change. But so far, from the state level, there is no change. There's nothing. So visit the website, call the governor's office, demand legislative change, demand an emergency declaration so we can operate ambulances, demand that this gets pushed through, not in 18 or 24 months. There's absolutely no reason for that. This needs to be approved right away, and it can be.
And a final thing too, you know, for everybody seeing Lifeline out there on the street buying gas, you know, those folks are trying really hard to provide good care to everybody. They're doing their jobs and they're getting their butts kicked. Please treat them nice, you know, buy them a soda or something.
And we do have a letter out to their employees from me, and just asking the public the same thing.
Exactly.
You know, we have a good relationship with them. I wasn't thinking when I was saying this, that's great on the camera if you're watching YouTube, but if you're on one of the podcast platforms. So when I say this, CAFMA CON application, it doesn't take 18 months to do this. That's the state dragging their feet. As a matter of fact, with an emergency declaration, and the governor can put pressure on the Bureau of EMS to push this CON through so that we can put real ambulances up and start making a difference in the system without being under the black cloud of investigation from the state or complaints from the private company. In fact, it would give us more ability to back the current private company up here if this is pushed through. But we have to have the governor take action on this. He's the only one that can do it because the Bureau of EMS certainly has shown no interest in doing anything to improve the system. In my estimation, in my opinion, this is a healthcare crisis for our communities. Something has to be done immediately, and we need you to take action. And if you go to our webpage, you can see what our call to action is and what you can do to help, because all of the information is right there at your fingertips. I know this is long. Doug, you told me to keep this to 30 minutes. The problem is there's too many questions out there, and there's no way for us to answer all of those questions in 30 minutes or less. And everybody has a different question. So we have to be able to answer them. And this is the best platform I could think of to put it out there, even though it's a little bit longer. So I appreciate your time this week, Doug. I know it always makes you nervous when I say, Doug, I have an idea.
Public speaking and stuff, I love it. Love this.
Well, good. I have some more for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. So until next week, Jonah, thank you so much for all your technical expertise and help. Thank you to Kathy, our creative genius in the front office, who is helping us, or doing a lot of the social media and design work on things. She does a fantastic job. Go to our webpage, click it, look at the information, and make the calls. The legislators and the governor's office and the Bureau of EMS, DHS need to hear from you. So thank you very much for your time. Until next week, Doug, we'll see you then.
See you later.